First of all, I'd like to thank the EGEP for this wonderful opportunity to share my thoughts with you today in the presence of President Kim Hae-suk. Over the past 2 decades, Ewha has become a home for me in Korea. Today, my talk is gender justice in religions with special reference to the Buddhist traditions. This one. Okay. I would like to begin my talk by sharing with you these 2 very interesting quotations. First, what is the point of religion if it does not change the world? It's a Muslim writer. And the second one is response from one of the leaders of Malaysian Islamic Party PAS when asked about gender justice in Islam in 2002. His answer was, of course there's gender justice in Islam, and women have rights too. Women have the right to be wives, for instance. One of the most intriguing dilemmas of religions in contemporary world is the seeming inner contradictions of religions whose original visions were to change the world for the best possible. While in reality everywhere today, religions, especially world religions, seem to act mostly as conservative forces in people's lives. Of course, each tradition of world religions, namely, just to name the major ones, Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism, has developed its own protected areas of painfully slow change, or in some extreme cases, no change at all, whether in terms of dogmas, rituals, teachings, codes of ethics, or laws. One area which is held to be beyond change to all religions seems to be the tight regulation and control of women's gender and sexuality. How does one begin to talk about gender justice to these conservative forces in religion? In November 2016, there was a report on sexual violence in the Bangkok Post. The headline reads, "Government fails to tackle assaults on women." It is reported that statistics on violence against women need to be upgraded to devise preventive measures. According to a leading gender equality activist in Thailand, Dr. Waraporn Chamsanit, the most up-to-date and reliable data Thailand has collected was in 2001, which stated that 44% of Thai women and girls faced sexual harassment once in their lifetimes and were likely to suffer repeated sexual abuse at the hands of male partners or friends. That seminar in Bangkok urged the public to create a more concerted effort to devise plans to fixing the problems of sexual violence for the long term. Another report from the State Ministry of Women Empowerment in Indonesia, conducted in 2001, revealed that 11.4% of the population, we are talking about some 24 million women, have experienced violence, mostly domestic violence, ranging from torture, sexual assault, and abuse. These statistics are actually only the tips of the iceberg, but they indicate important problems for activists to work for elimination of violence against women. At this point, I propose a view that the real-life situation of violence against women is embedded in a deep-rooted discourse of culture, which tells stories of male and female relationship lying at the basis of many practices of violence against women. Popular Buddhist teachings in Thailand include sayings like, being born a woman is due to bad or inferior karma in past life, or a Siamese queen in the 14th century made a wish to be reborn a male in her next life. According to Professor Johan Kautung, the leading theorist on nonviolence would say the physical violence is explained, maintained, justified, or condoned by layers of cultural and structural violence. The readiness of a male to inflict violence on a female in many situations is informed, cultivated, and justified by layers of cultural beliefs. Research on domestic violence in Thai society recorded many cases of wives who were physically abused by their husband, and when they tried to report to the police at the police station, in many cases, the police would be reluctant to put in the daily record, as they would say that domestic quarrels are private matters, just like the teeth would sometimes bite the tongue. In a recent report by the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung Bangkok office, one significant success of many feminist NGOs in Thailand is to establish a program that there will be police investigators in police stations, and a body search on a woman has to be performed by the female police officer. Today, I would like to address one particular aspect of that culture. Of course, I cannot cover all aspects of Thai culture. That one particular aspect, especially that is intimately influenced by religion, with great implications for the question of gender justice in religion. In the Thai context, Buddhism is not only a religion, it is the dominant culture with subtle and sometimes not easily visible forces working on different planes simultaneously on the everyday lives of men and women. In order to develop collective efforts in working for social justice, which I believe we are all trying to do here, we might benefit from learning about the different strategies needed in negotiating for more justice in each realm of religious discourses. Today, I cannot pretend to be able to do justice to the important issue of gender justice in religion. What I will attempt is a modest effort to address this problem by proposing 3 points relating to gender justice in religions for your consideration. First is gender equality. What are you talking about? It's a disorienting effect of an encounter with total otherness of an ambassador of Persian. And 2 is 3 discourses of religion, namely the legal, the moral narrative, and the symbolic, artistic. And 3 is different strategies for gender justice. First, I would like to share with you an account of a Persian ambassador encountering the ruler of Aceh. Aceh is in Indonesia in the 17th century. I would like to address this incredible difficulty in building a bridge to communicate a concern like gender justice to religious conservatives. I address this issue by recounting an episode on how the Persian ambassador was shocked by his encounter with the ruler of Aceh in the 17th century, and I use a research by Farish Noor. Some of you might have known him. There's an account of the 17th century Persian embassy dispatched to the court of King of Ayutthaya, Siam, that is Thailand today. As fate would have it, the ship that carried the ambassador of Persia was blown off course by strong winds as it crossed the Bay of Bengal. Unable to make a landing on the western coast of the Malay Peninsula, the ship was blown all the way to the northeastern coast of Sumatra instead, where the ship finally found a safe harbor at the port of Aceh. The Persian ambassador was forced to stop his journey for a while as the winds continued unabated, and in time the emissary from the court of Aceh arrived to call upon the ambassador and invite him to the presence of the ruler of Aceh. The Persian ambassador approached the palace of the ruler. He noted the progress and development of Aceh. That was then one of the most important port cities of Southeast Asia, trading with countries and continents as distant as China, India, and Europe. When he was brought to the presence of the ruler, he was struck dumb. It turned out that the Sultan was in fact a woman, Sultana Safida Tuddin of Aceh, ruled 1641 to 1675. The ambassador noted in his diary that the ruler of Aceh was a woman, no less, and that she was armed with several keris. Keris is a short knife. Her bodyguard was made of men of equal martial prowess and demeanor, and he was amazed by the fact that the aristocracy or Rangaya of Aceh would submit to the rule of a woman, no matter how competent she might be. He noted in his letter to the Shah of Persia that the people of Aceh had to be Muslims of weak faith and low morals to submit to such a thing. From this account of the Persian ambassador, we get a glimpse of what a totally unexpected encounter with female rulership could do to the thought process of a man. First, as an ambassador, I would imagine that he is probably well educated, not just any ordinary man. He must have traveled far and wide and has come into contact with many different cultural practices. Relatively speaking, his cultural horizon must be broader than an ordinary man in the empire of the Shah in the 17th century. Second, he noted that the kingdom of Aceh is no primitive society where one would expect that trading, economic, military, and administrative structures would be rudimentary. On the contrary, from the ambassador's own description, there was the aristocracy, well-armed bodyguards working for and under a female ruler in a thriving seaport. So the argument of lesser or primitive civilization does not apply here, nor does his wide exposures to cultural differences prepare him for this. His only possible explanation then became the people of Aceh had to be Muslims of weak faith and low morals to submit to such a thing. For the ambassador, the Islamic religion can only recognize a male rulership. Political power is essentially male. Those males who submit to female rulership must be weak and low in morals. When you totally fail to understand something, your conclusion is that it must be bad. When we pose the question of gender justice to religious conservatives in today's world, 21st century, are we posing an intelligible question to them? Note the response from the past leader, the Muslim politician, when asked about gender justice in Islam, when I showed the first PowerPoint. Now we move to the second part of my talk today, the discourses of religion. Usually when one consults a textbook on religion, whether in the fields of philosophy of religion, anthropology, history, religious studies, one would most likely find that religion is explained in terms of its different components. The textbook will tell you that a world religion would have a textual canon, an administrative body of monks or priests, forms of rituals, codes of ethics, and laws. Some religion, like Islam, would not have priests, but only imams who would have wide knowledge of the Quran, but religious knowledge is not the basis of their livelihood. For my talk today, I would like to propose a different way of understanding religion through an analysis of three types of interconnected religious discourses. First is the legal codes, as explicated in Islamic Sharia laws, the Vinayas for the Buddhist monks. These laws regulate religious life and create a distinctive religious community. In the Buddhist tradition, there are 5, 8, 10 precepts for lay people, 227 for monks, and 311 for female monks. Second is the philosophical text or the canon, which points to a transcendent being, a god, or indicates a cosmology about the origin of the universe. This cosmic image offers a vision of the ideal in the world beyond this empirical existence, which forms the moral basis of this world. And most importantly, that world indicates the best possible life for believers. So the best possible life is not here, it lies beyond, it lies in the world beyond this one. In most cases, this cosmic meta-narrative tells a story of human origin and the natural and the moral evolution of the universe as a grand narrative, with human beings at the center. At that center, we have a powerful story of male-female relationship. This cosmic moral narrative serves as the basis and the explanation of how this world should be organized. The cosmic narrative is considered sacred and normative and cannot be violated. The story of Eve as the first sinner and her submission to male authority as a punishment for her sin is a clear example of this. Although many leading feminist scholars today have argued that Eve is actually the first philosopher, not the first sinner. She is the first human to use her free will in choosing to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. She contemplates that the fruit is nutritious, beautiful, and giving of the knowledge of good and evil. It is interesting to note that the conspicuous silence of Adam in taking the fruit from Eve is worth further reflection. What is important is that the power relationship between the male and the female is embedded in a larger comprehensive story of the origin of the universe and the source of the quote-unquote proper order of things in this world. The Hindu creation myth of the Brahmin issuing forth from the mouth of the Lord Brahma, while other peoples are the Lord's body, limbs, and feet. This cosmic image explains and justifies the caste system with the Brahmins as the pure and the highest caste. And a Brahmin woman can go to heaven only by hanging on to the ritual robe of her son or husband. In Buddhist Thailand, many mothers still hold on to the belief that they can go to heaven only by hanging on to the yellow robe in the saffron color of the Buddhist monk of their sons in order to go to heaven. As Thai women have no access to full ordination as monks, the access to heaven for women is dependent on having a son who is willing to become a monk at some time in his life and dedicate the merits to his parents, especially his mother. This belief has incredible influence on the decisions of parents providing financial support for their sons over their daughters. It also places a special burden of gratitude on the shoulders of the daughters to work and provide some financial support for their parents, as the religious channel of becoming a monk is not a possibility for women in Thai society. The stories and statistics of female sex workers and migrant workers in Thailand in the past 6 decades of economic development testify to the impact of these traditional Buddhist beliefs on women's lives in contemporary Thailand. At this point, I would like to add a brief account of the complicated history of the Buddhist position on gender justice. We cannot too easily equate Buddhist popular beliefs that I cited before with Buddhism or the Buddhist philosophical position. Scholarship on Buddhism and women have provided us with a rich and complicated history of the Buddhist position on women. In general, we can say with confidence that the noble path of the Buddha had provided unprecedented possibility for women in spiritual practice without dependence on male members of their family. The difficult decision of the Buddha to allow full ordination for women, first to his aunt and then to other women in ancient Hindu society, meant that women can work for their own spiritual liberation. They did not need to hang on to the ritual robe of their sons in order to go to heaven. In contemporary language, we might say that the Buddha respects the rights of women to spiritual practice as a monk. In this sense, it is a milestone towards gender justice for women, as the most noble way of life, a life outside the family, is open to women, and the highest respect for the female as a gender is also open for women. This illustrates the Buddha concern for the what I call equality of women, which transcends not only caste but gender. Third is the symbolic, ritualistic, and artistic discourse. This discourse provides an inspiration for ritual performance, architectural designs, and artistic expressions. In many temples in Thailand, there are certain areas which are not allowed for women for fear of contamination. In rituals and prayers, many Muslim gatherings require strict segregation between the two sexes. The multiple and complex beauty of human depiction of the divine, whether the Buddha statues, the religious walls paintings of the famous Tung Huang cave in China, or the Borobudur in Yogyakarta, the Angkor Wat in Cambodia, are symbolic, artistic expressions of the divine. Very often, female deities are depicted as entourage of the male god. In Theravada Buddhist heaven, beautiful female deities are often promised for good deeds of men in this world. Before we go to the last part of my talk on different strategies, I would like to offer a brief overview. It's not in here. Okay. A brief overview of the question of social justice as a context for gender justice in Thai Buddhist society. So I put a very simple question. In what way Buddhism has shaped the sense of justice in Thai culture? I would propose that the single most important teaching is the concept of karma. Buddhism sees life as a journey through cycles of birth and death, conditioned by the law of karma. Karma is a person's own good and bad deeds, which explain differences in social and economic status. If you are born rich and powerful, it's because of your own good karma. If you are born poor and powerless, it's because of your bad karma. I would risk oversimplification, but I would like to propose that social injustice of the present is too often explained as moral justice of the past. However, during the time of the Buddha, the concept of karma functions for a totally different purpose. It was used to explain equality of people. During the time of the Buddha, the concept of karma was actually explained as a critique of the Hindu caste system of rigid social hierarchy. Second, Buddhism in Thai society has been taught mainly as an ethics of the individuals. If you practice the 5 precepts of non-killing, non-stealing, non-lying, no sexual misconduct, and non-intoxication, then you are a good Buddhist. There has not been a clearly articulated form of Buddhism which addresses social injustice. Actually, some of you might have heard of a movement called Socially Engaged Buddhism of Sulaksivaraksa and Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, initiated in the 70s and 80s, were precisely to introduce Buddhism which would address social injustice, human rights, and democracies. It's sad to say that in more traditional times, oppressive social structure was not identified as a question of social injustice. Imagine if you see a homeless child living under a highway near a slum area. What would you think? I can think of at least 3. There are many possibilities, but I think I can think of at least three basic possibilities. First is a question of bad urban development. Second is a question of the bad karma of the boy. And third is the structural problem of unequal resource distributions in the country. I'm not pointing to Buddhism as a cause for all ills. I am identifying one key element in the Thai Buddhist culture which has been used, overused, exploited, or even abused to explain inequality and social injustice. So I would like just to offer you this. Karma explains differences. Differences justify inequality through social hierarchy, and therefore karma is closely related to the question of justice. On top of the problem of seeing unequal social hierarchy as implying justice and not injustice, the question of gender justice in Thai Buddhist culture is closely related to another major factor, that is the lack of possibility for female ordination in Theravada country like Thailand. During traditional times, both in major cities and in the rural area, education was in the hands of the monks in the monasteries. Rules of conduct for monks have prevented girls from receiving education because as education requires residence in the temple. I mentioned 220 rules for monks, one of which is not to touch a girl or a woman. I'm not saying that the monastery intended not to give education to girls. Okay? It's just this lack of equal opportunity for education for girls, a problem which has been echoed in many of our presentations in the past 3-4 days, has led to many obstacles for women to achieve equal recognition and treatment in many other fields of life. The quest for gender justice is eclipsed under the shadow of social injustice. That's why it's so difficult to become visible. Okay, now we go to the last part. Different strategies for gender justice. Of course, I'm not arguing that all aspects of modern life are dictated or determined by religion. On the contrary, the more a society develops, the less religious it becomes. And yet, the thesis that modernization will gradually destroy religious aspiration and makes obsolete religious practice have been proved wrong. Evidences are everywhere. The rise of Muslim population in the more developed worlds, like in the US and many countries in Europe. And this is not only because of Muslim immigrants. The rise of Japanese religious cults and groups after World War II. The rise of many forms of Buddhist reformist movements in Thailand in recent decades. The rise of liberation theology in Latin America are good examples of the staying power of religion in modern life. Given our discussion of the 3 discourses of religion, we could identify at least 3 groups of different peoples whom the question of gender justice needs to be addressed. First, the legal arbiters and activists, sisters in Islam. We heard yesterday from Professor Rashida. Venerable Dhammananda in Thailand, Women for Change group in Thailand are examples of groups of leading women in religion who have been trying to negotiate with the legal institution on issues of equal access to ordination in the case of Buddhism and on more equal roles for women in Islam. Regarding the second type of discourse, the philosophical canon, we have many feminist scholars in the Christian, Buddhist, and Islamic traditions who have done great scholarships for new interpretations of canonical texts which are more conducive to gender justice. We have Saina Anwar, we have Amina Wadud in Islam, we have Dhammananda in Buddhism, we have Grace Jansen in the Christian tradition, just to name a few. The third type of discourse, the artistic, symbolic, we have many groups of artists, novelists in Indonesia, Buddhist women writers in Thailand who have produced works which give voices to the question of domestic violence and parental abuse of young daughters, which have remained largely silent in society at large. I'm sure many of you can share more examples. Of the three discourses, it seems to me that the third discourse is most open to alternatives, as it does not lay claim to truth. Rather, it expresses the emotional and aesthetic experiences. It seems that the artists enjoy the most freedom. The scholars who deal with the second type of discourses, the philosophical texts and all that, are somewhat protected by academic freedom in the university, so they can offer critical reinterpretation of religious canons. But oftentimes their works are not transmitted or digested by activists in the field. Their impact is therefore rather limited. The most formidable walls against change for gender justice are from the institutions of religious power. The majority of monks, the imams, and the priests who represent religious authority and control over people's lives are embedded in a regime of authoritarian power. It would be great if they learn to make a distinction between being authoritative and being authoritarian. From my personal observation, most of them are decent people with good intentions, but far too few of them have been exposed to or cultivated in gender sensitivity. Maybe Professor Kim Bun-chil could develop an EGEP for them. Last, I would like to propose to you how to gauge or how to monitor some kind of progress that's being made for gender justice for women. First is girls' access to education. At least we do not have extreme case like the Taliban in Asia. Ewha Women's University is a shining example of providing quality education for girls in Asia. Second is authority of female voices on religion. This aspect is making good progress, as I cited some of the major feminist scholars on religion, although the influence is still limited. Third, access to regulation of gender identity and agency. In other words, how the laws and regulations are accommodating to different shades of transgender identities or LGBT groups, for example. Fourth, access to books, medias, and alternative resources that speak from and to women's experiences. I think this aspect seems to be making good progress, especially in the social media. And finally, the most important and difficult, equal access to institutions of religious power. The walls against this possibility are still very high and thick. So I think we need to address at least these 5 areas in working for gender justice in societies where religion or religious-based culture still loom large in people's lives. And my concluding remark, I'm afraid the mindset of the ambassador from Persia in the 17th century is still pretty much alive in too many men of religious powers in the 21st century. Our work in these 3 areas of religious discourses could help identify the issues and provide broad guidance for changing the situation for the better. This is what religion is meant to deliver to this world in the first place. Somehow, that original vision has been lost, and we women need to help restore and restart that spark for hope, that spark of hope for change. Thank you so much.
감사합니다.
Thank you.